Dad texted, "Don't contact us. Don't come around. You're on your own now." Like, I answered, "Great. My sister reacted with, "Cancel the auto payments first thing tomorrow." By midnight, the chat exploded after they mocked my job and rent. My name's Carson, 29, financial analyst. Decent apartment, predictable routines. I handle numbers for a living, but for years, the only numbers that really mattered were the ones tied to my family's comfort. I paid the internet, the groceries, the property taxes, even the streaming subscriptions no one thanked me for. Every line item was a small act of loyalty. I never stopped to question. Dad, Carson, liked to say he'd retired early, though no one could recall from what. He called it burnout. I called it convenience. Mom Marian quit soon after chasing what she described as peace. Most days that meant long walks, long naps, and long complaints about bills that just seemed to appear. And Lela, my older sister, my opposite in every sense, loud, impulsive, glittered in filters. An influencer with big dreams and small discipline. When sponsorships fell through, she called me. When the rent was late, she cried into the phone, and somehow it always ended with me transferring money and saying, "Just this once." But once has a way of becoming always, and always has a way of becoming invisible. Grandpa Walter Carson, Dad's father, saw through it. He'd tilt his coffee mug toward me and say, "You can't buy peace, kid. You can only rent it, and the rent's steep." I'd laugh like I didn't understand, even though I did. He was the only one who never asked me for a thing, which somehow made me love him more. The truth is, my family didn't collapse overnight. It eroded little pieces of me, traded for their comfort, until there was nothing left to give. When the text came that night, it wasn't betrayal. It was confirmation. The bill for 12 years of quiet sacrifice had finally come due. Dad's message hit like a hammer. "Don't contact us. Don't come around. You're on your own now." Lela's reaction, a simple thumbs up, was colder than the words. No explanation, no call, just that tiny blue icon flashing under my father's cruelty. I stared at the screen. My reflection ghosted in the glass. For once, I didn't feel panic. I felt the air. I typed back, "Great. I'll cancel the auto payments first thing tomorrow." It wasn't anger that moved my thumbs. It was balanced. The math had finally evened out. By midnight, my phone was glowing like a warning light. Missed calls stacked like dominoes, Mom pleading, Dad demanding, Lela gaslighting. But I didn't reply. I poured a glass of water, turned off the dryer, and whispered to myself, "This is what stopping sounds like." It wasn't revenge, it was a reset. And by the time the first hint of dawn touched the window, I knew the silence that followed would be louder than anything I could ever say. The messages didn't stop that night. They multiplied. My phone buzzed until it felt alive in my hand. By 1 in the morning, there were 47 unread texts and 8 missed calls. The last one was from Mom. What kind of daughter talks like that to her family? I didn't answer. I just turned the screen face down and listened to the silence press against the walls. When dawn crept in, I was still awake. The apartment smelled faintly of detergent and lavender, clean but empty. For the first time in years, I didn't have a bill to pay, a phone call to make, or a favor to fix. The quiet felt wrong, too wide, too new. At 6 a.m., my phone rang again. The name flashing across the screen wasn't one I expected, Grandpa Walt. "Morning, kid," he said. His voice was gravelly soft around the edges. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Good, bring your calm face," he said. "You'll need it." An hour later, I was driving through streets that still remembered me, old storefronts, the park, where I learned to ride a bike, the bakery, where Mom once worked before finding peace. Every corner looked the same. But I didn't. Grandpa House sat on a quiet hill, coffee smell leaking through the open window. He was already at the table when I walked in, 2 mugs, a plate of buttered toast, and a folder thick enough to hold history. "You look tired," he said. "I stopped sleeping when I stopped paying." He nodded like he'd expected that. Then he pushed the folder toward me. "You need to see this." Inside were papers, letters, and tax records with an address printed again and again: Cedar Hollow, the house where my parents lived, the house I grew up in. "I don't understand," I said. "You will," he replied. "They never owned it, Phoenix, not for one day. It's mine, always has been." The air left my lungs. "They told me I know what they told you," he said gently. "They said they were rebuilding, that they just needed time. 12 years is a long time for a temporary stay." I stared at the papers, the numbers, the signatures. It was all there. My parents hadn't just lived rent-free. They'd treated kindness like a deed. Grandpa leaned back, eyes steady. I gave them 60 days to leave. Does Dad know? Not yet. But he will. I pressed my palms against the table. They'll say I made you do it. They'll say anything to stay comfortable, he said. But this, he tapped the folder, isn't punishment. It's true catching up. The words echoed, truth catching up. That's what it felt like, slow, steady, impossible to outrun. When I left his house, the folder stayed behind, but the weight came with me. By the time I reached my car, my phone was lighting up again. Dad's name, Mom's name, Lela's name, all stacked on top of each other. I didn't pick up. I just whispered, let them call, started the engine and drove home to the sound of my own breathing. You think cutting us off makes you better? You've ruined everything. I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence travels farther than anger ever could. That morning, Grandpa called again. They got the letters, he said. His voice was calm, like he was announcing the weather. And they're spinning. Your dad called me cruel. Your mom said she can't believe I'd do this to my family. I let out a slow breath. You knew they'd say that. He chuckled softly. People only call it cruelty when the free ride ends. The world outside was bright, but I couldn't feel it. At work, I sat at my desk staring at spreadsheets while my phone vibrated under a pile of papers. I muted every notification. For once, I didn't need to chase balance on someone else's behalf. That night, I stopped by Grandpa's again. The house smelled like coffee and sawdust, steady and grounded. He was in the kitchen sealing 3 envelopes. They'll get these tomorrow, he said. What are they, certified copies of the notice? Legal follow-up. Paper doesn't flinch when people cry. He slid one across the table for me to read. It was a simple, almost kind notice of termination of occupancy 60 days. Beneath it, his signature, strong and clean. I sat down. They'll hate me for this. He looked up. They already do, kid. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped bleeding for them. Something in me cracked open. Then not pain, but relief. For years, I'd been the invisible foundation of their peace. Now I could finally step out from under it. When I got home, I opened my laptop and began what I should have done long ago. I canceled every auto payment tied to their address, utilities, taxes, even the streaming service Lela used to film her relatable videos. With each click, the air in the room grew lighter. Click water, click electric, click gas. The last one was property tax. I hovered over the confirm button for a long moment before pressing it. The next morning, a storm of texts poured in. Dad, how could you do this to your own parents, Mom? We raised you better. Lela, you're dead to me. I read them all while sipping coffee in my kitchen. Then I put the phone down and whispered, good, let the old version die. Grandpa called later to check in. They'll fight, he warned. When comfort ends, people panic. Let them, I said quietly. I'd done renting peace for the first time. He didn't sound worried that my girl, he said. That night I slept without checking my phone. The silence was different now, no longer empty, just earned. The storm didn't break. It performed. By the time Saturday rolled around, Lela had turned the family fallout into content. A screenshot of our old house, a crying selfie, a caption dripping with victimhood. We're being thrown out of our own home. Sometimes family turns into strangers. Pray for us. It took exactly 4 hours for her post to explode. Hundreds of sympathy comments poured in. So heartbreaking. Money makes monsters. How could your sister do this? I sat at my kitchen table scrolling through them in silence, a mug of tea growing cold beside me. Each comment was a stranger's finger pointing at me. Then came the calls. Aunt Rose, first voice trembling with disbelief. Honey, what's going on? Your mom says they're being evicted. They are, I said. Evicted from their own home. Not their home, I corrected, my tone steadily. Grandpa's. They've lived there rent-free for 12 years. He's ending it. Silence. Then a soft, stunned, oh, that sound, that small crack in her certainty was the first domino to fall. By evening, Uncle Dan texted, not surprised. Always knew Greg was milking your granddad. Emma, our drama-hungry cousin, sent me a screenshot of Lela's post with 3 words, still love you though. But the real shift came Sunday afternoon. Grandpa Walt sent an email to everyone in the family thread with the subject line, facts regarding the residents at Cedar Hollow. I opened it and read the words that would end the performance. The property at Cedar Hollow is legally owned by me, Walter Carson. My son Greg and his family have lived there rent-free since 2013. They have not paid utilities taxes or upkeep for over a decade. My granddaughter, Phoenix Carson, has covered these costs entirely from her own income for the last 4 years. I have issued a 60-day notice for them to vacate. This decision was mine alone. Being family does not exempt anyone from responsibility. The message hit like thunder. Within minutes, replies poured in, some apologetic, others shocked. By evening, Lela's comment section began to shrink. Sympathy emojis vanished. A few brave followers quoted Grandpa's email under her post. The noise died fast, but the damage was done. Mom doubled down at the one place she still had an audience, the church. During Sunday service, she stood during prayer requests, trembling, voice breaking, just enough to sell the pain. Please pray for us. Our children have turned against us. We're losing our home. By nightfall, the rumor mill was spinning again. I ignored it until Mrs. Crane, my old Sunday school teacher, called Grandpa asking what really happened. He told her calmly, line by line, the same way he used to tell bedtime stories when I was small. By the time he hung up, even she sounded embarrassed for believing otherwise. They'll keep playing the victim, Grandpa said later, until the audience leaves. He was right. But what came next proved just how deep the performance ran. 3 days later, a new message slid into my inbox. The sender's name froze my scrolling thumb. Caleb Ward, a guy from high school I hadn't heard from in a decade. Hey Phoenix, this might sound weird, but I think I stayed at your parents' house through Airbnb last March. Recognize the kitchen from your sister's posts. I can send screenshots if you want. My chest tightened. Airbnb. They didn't own that house, Grandpa did. I called him right away. He didn't even sound surprised. Go get the guest book, he said. People who fake ownership love proof of their fake hospitality, so I went. The house at Cedar Hollow looked exactly the same from the outside. The porch light, the leaning mailbox, the same old maple tree shedding leaves onto the walkway. But the moment Lela opened the door, everything felt different. Her makeup was smudged, her voice sharp. What are you doing here? I left some things in the basement, I said. Just need to grab them. She hesitated. Make it quick. Mom's upstairs. The air inside smelled like cheap perfume and candles trying too hard. The walls were lined with small corny signs. Welcome guests. Stay cozy. Wi-Fi Cedar 2023. A vacation rental inside the house. My grandparents built with their own hands downstairs. I found it exactly where I imagined a small decorative chest, labeled supplies and notes, inside Wi-Fi cards, printed instructions, a spiral-bound guest book filled with handwriting. Thank you for the lovely stay. The maple tree view was amazing, dates, names, payment references, page after page. I took photos of everything, my hands shaking, but my mind crystal clear. When I climbed back up, Mom stood at the top of the stairs. Her face was pale, furious. What are you doing here? Leaving, I said, and brushed past her. That night, every photo sat printed on Grandpa's kitchen table under the same lamp that had lit so many quiet breakfasts. He studied each page slowly. They turned my house into a motel, he murmured, and still cried when I asked them to leave. The next morning, he called his lawyer. Within 2 days, a court order reduced their notice from 60 days to 14. Unauthorized subletting, clear violation, case closed. And still, they didn't stop. Mom called relatives, claiming Grandpa was senile. Dad visited old neighbors, saying I'd forged papers. Lela went live on social media, teary-eyed and rehearsed. Some people manipulate the elderly for money. I just want peace. The performance was flawless, except the audience had changed. Grandpa invited 4 of his oldest friends, including a retired attorney, to his living room. He handed each of them a neat folder property, deed screenshots, guestbook entries, even a doctor's statement verifying his mental clarity. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse me. He just said, this is what's real. When the last folder closed, the attorney spoke quietly. They won't spin this anymore, Walt. You've got everything. That evening, Lela's latest post disappeared. So did the ones before it. For the first time in weeks, my phone stayed quiet. 14 days later, they moved out. Boxes stacked on the porch. Curtains gone. The maple tree is still standing, steady and different. Grandpa didn't go watch. He didn't need to. When it was over, I drove by once. The porch looked smaller without their chaos. Beneath the steps, I spotted a single key glinting in the sunlight, left behind. That night, Grandpa called. The house is empty, he said simply. I nodded though he couldn't see me. You want me to come by? No, he said. They need to leave alone. He paused. Then, with that quiet certainty, only age can be added, you did the right thing, kid. You showed them life doesn't come with free refills. I didn't cry. I just looked out at the city lights and felt something unclench in my chest. 12 years of invisible labor. One truth. Justice had never looked so still. When the moving truck finally disappeared down the hill, the silence felt different, earned not empty. I stood by the window of my apartment, the same one that used to smell like lavender and exhaustion, and realized it finally just smelled like me. Grandpa Walt called that afternoon. The house is quiet, he said. They left a cracked flower pot and a key. Do you want it? I smiled faintly. No, I like my life as it is. He chuckled softly. Peace doesn't always come from who leaves. Sometimes it comes from who you let go. 2 weeks later, a plain envelope showed up in my mailbox, Dad's handwriting. Inside was a letter and a half-filled loan form with my name already typed in as cosigner. No apology, just manipulation wearing a polite mask. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I laughed. Not bitter, not angry, just tired. I took a photo of the form, sent it to Grandpa, and said, "Guess they're still digging." He replied, "Then we'll just build higher walls." The next day, he called his lawyer. By evening, my credit was locked down, every account protected. For the first time in months, I felt completely safe. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea, stepped onto the balcony, and let the wind move through me. The war was over. All that was left was quiet. I haven't spoken to them since, and that silence has become its own kind of peace. The house at Cedar Hollow sits empty now, sunlight drifting through its windows like forgiveness. I stopped the payments, but really, I stopped paying for peace I never received. If you've ever had to protect yourself from the people who are supposed to love you, you know it's not cruelty. It's clear. You're not alone in cutting ties to heal.